Like and subscribe if you want to dive into the bizarre, the grotesque, and the downright shocking corners of history. Ever wondered what medieval punishment involved being locked in a cage with a ravenous rat? Or which ancient civilization thought it was a good idea to bathe in urine? Stick around, because today we're unearthing the oddities that make you question humanity's sanity. Let's kick things off with a classic. The English used to execute traitors by hanging, drawing, and quartering. Sounds like a fun day out, right? And speaking of fun, did you know that in ancient Rome, a common practice involved using powdered mouse brains as a beauty treatment? Yes, really. Who needs modern skincare when you have, well, rodent remains? But wait, there's more. Ever heard of the dancing plague of 1518? Picture this, people in Strasbourg just couldn't stop dancing, literally. They danced until they dropped, and we're not talking a cute little waltz. No, this was full-on, chaotic jigging until they collapsed from exhaustion. What was in the water back then? Now, here's a thought: if you could pick any bizarre historical event to experience firsthand, what would it be? The mummification methods of the ancient Egyptians, complete with all sorts of creepy rituals. Or perhaps the feasts of the Roman Empire, where they'd eat until they literally exploded? Talk about a dinner party gone wrong. And yes, we'll be dropping some specific dates and jaw-dropping facts that'll have you questioning how we survived as a species. So, if you haven't already, turn on loop so this episode can repeat until you're too drowsy to care about history, or anything else, really. Ready to explore history's darkest corners? Let's dive in. ### The Unexciting History of Byzantine Court Shoe Polishing Schedules. Ah, the Byzantine Empire. A realm of opulence, intrigue, and yes, even shoe polish schedules. You might think the footwear of emperors and empresses would be the least interesting aspect of their resplendent reigns. But let me assure you, the meticulous art of shoe polishing at the Byzantine court is a saga that deserves attention, if only for the sheer absurdity of it all. ### The dawn of polishing, 330 AD. Our tale begins in the year 330 AD, in the city of Byzantium, soon to be renamed Constantinople after Emperor Constantine I. Now, this wasn't just any city, it was the crossroads of East and West, a hub of culture, trade, and, apparently, footwear maintenance. The earliest records indicate that the Byzantine elite were already obsessed with their appearance, leading to the establishment of the first known shoe polishing schedule. What did this schedule entail, you ask? A rotating roster of servants responsible for the care of shoes. Yes, you heard that right. A whole team of people dedicated to the shiny brilliance of footwear. The schedule was so precise that shoes were polished 3 times a day, before breakfast, after lunch, and before dinner. Who needs a foot massage when you can have your shoes gleaming like the sun? ### The Golden Age of Shoe Polish, 527 to 565 AD. Fast forward to the reign of Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD. This era was a veritable shoe polishing renaissance. Justinian, an emperor who believed that every detail mattered, especially those that could blind a rival at the court, ensured that the shoe shining schedule was strictly adhered to. The imperial palace had not just one, but 4 dedicated shoe polishers for each member of the imperial family. This is where the absurdity peaks. Did you know that these polishers were graded based on their ability to create a shine that could reflect one's face? Yes, you could literally check your makeup in your shoes. The schedule specified that if a polisher failed to achieve the desired gloss, they could be subjected to a week of dusting the throne room, a punishment that involved sweeping and polishing the very seat of power, ironically while wearing shoes that were not up to par. Hashtag rhetorical questions for the ages. Who knew that a simple pair of shoes could hold so much power? Did the polishers ever consider abandoning their duties for a more adventurous life? Perhaps running away to join a circus where their shining skills could dazzle audiences instead? Hashtag the height of absurdity, 1000 AD. Now, let's leap ahead to the year 1000 AD, a time when the Byzantine Empire was at the height of its power. A little-known fact, during this period, the shoe polishing schedule became even more elaborate. The Duke of Cappadocia reportedly introduced a competition for the best polished shoe in court. This wasn't just for vanity's sake, it was a way to indicate loyalty and status. Imagine the scene: courtiers gathered around, eyes glued to the shoes of their peers, gossiping about whose footwear was the most reflective. The prize? A coveted golden shoehorn, said to have belonged to Empress Theodora herself. The competition was fierce, and it was rumored that some contestants resorted to dubious practices, such as using beeswax from the sacred hives of Mount Athos to get that extra gleam. But here's the kicker: during one particularly intense competition, a polisher went rogue and substituted regular polish with a rare unicorn horn powder, which was not only illegal but also terribly impractical. The court erupted in scandal when it was discovered that instead of a brilliant shine, the shoes began to emit an odd smell reminiscent of burnt toast. Who knew that a quest for shine could lead to such olfactory disasters? Hashtag the rituals of the court, 1200 AD. As we approached the year 1200 AD, the Byzantine court had developed a series of rituals surrounding shoe polishing that would make even the most devoted beauty influencers blush. The court's shoe polishers became part of a sacred guild known as the Order of the Gleaming Soul, complete with initiation rites that involved balancing a polished shoe on one's head while reciting the Byzantine code of footwear etiquette. The schedule had transformed into a ritualistic affair. On the first day of every month, a grand ceremony was held where all the shoes in the palace were lined up for inspection. This was no ordinary inspection. It included a panel of officials known as the shoe elders, who would smell, touch, and ultimately judge the quality of the polish. Just imagine the tension in that room. 1. Smell test. Shoes were sniffed like fine wine. A pungent odor could lead to immediate disqualification. 2. Reflection test. If you could not see your face in the shoe's reflection, it was a fail. 3. Durability test. Shoes were subjected to a walk-off on the palace's marble floors to test the lasting shine. Did they ever wonder if they had gone too far? Did anyone ever consider that perhaps shoes were meant for walking, not for judging one's character? Hashtag the fall of the empire, 1453. As we edge toward the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the shoe polishing schedules began to reflect the chaos of the times. The Ottoman Turks, led by Sultan Mehmed II, were not particularly concerned with the Byzantine obsession over shiny shoes. The last emperor, Constantine XI, was too busy strategizing his defense to worry about whether his shoes were polished to perfection. However, legend has it that on the eve of the city's fall, Constantine XI gathered his court one last time. The shoe polishers, ever loyal, clung to tradition and insisted on a final polish. In a moment of dark humor, as the Turks were breaching the gates, the emperor reportedly shouted, "At least let's go down with shiny shoes." Hashtag legacy of the polishing schedule. So what became of these rigorous shoe polishing schedules once the empire fell? The practices faded into obscurity, but the concept of meticulous shoe care lived on. The Renaissance, as it turned out, was not just about art and science, it was also about well-polished footwear. While the world was busy evolving, the idea of a shoe polishing schedule remained a curious footnote in history. Did it matter that emperors had their shoes polished with the fervor of a religious rite? Perhaps not, but who wouldn't want to live in a world where every shoe shone like a beacon of power? Hashtag conclusion, the absurdity lives on. In conclusion, the unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules is filled with intrigue, competition, and a healthy dose of absurdity. From the early days of Constantine to the final hours of Constantine XI, the obsession with shoe shine serves as a reminder that even the most mundane practices can hold deep cultural significance. As you ponder the fate of those shoes and the fate of the empire, remember this: in the grand tapestry of history, perhaps it's not the wars or the treaties that define us, but rather the shine of our shoes, or at least how well we can reflect on the past. So next time you're scrubbing your own shoes, consider the Byzantine emperors who once stood in their courts, all in the name of a good polish. What would they think of your sneaker game today? Hashtag the unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. Hashtag introduction. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, rife with emperors, intrigues, and theological debates, there lurks a surprisingly mundane yet essential topic: the shoe polishing schedules of the Byzantine court. While one might be tempted to dismiss this as trivial, the meticulous nature of shoe care in a court known for its opulence reveals a great deal about the broader societal norms, bureaucratic structures, and even the economics of the time. Strap in as we embark on a brisk, albeit unconventional journey through the unexciting annals of Byzantine court shoe polishing. Hashtag construction methods, materials, and costs. The Byzantine Empire, thriving from approximately 330 AD to 1453 AD, had a deep devotion to aesthetics, and this extended to footwear. The shoes worn in court were not merely functional, they were often crafted from the finest materials available. The primary components included 1. Leather, the most common material, sourced from cattle, goats, and occasionally exotic animals like crocodiles. The tanning process, typically involving natural tannins, was labor-intensive and often used bark or nuts as key ingredients. 2. Silk, used predominantly for decorative purposes. Silk was a luxury material imported from the East, particularly from China. The cost of silk was prohibitively high, making it a status symbol. 3. Wooden sawls, though less common, wooden sawls were sometimes employed, particularly for ceremonial purposes. They were coated with a layer of leather to prevent wear and tear. In terms of cost, a pair of basic court shoes could range from 15 solidi, the standard currency, to over 100 solidi for pairs adorned with jewels and intricate designs. To put this in perspective, a skilled artisan's monthly wage could be around 30 solidi. Thus, the financial investment in a pair of shoes was significant. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. The Byzantine court was notorious for its labyrinthine bureaucracy. Shoe polishing schedules were no exception. From the reign of Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD, onward, a series of edicts established strict rules governing the care of footwear. 1. Daily polishing mandate. Each courtier was required to have their shoes polished daily. Failure to comply resulted in a fine of 5 solidi or, in more severe cases, a reprimand from the emperor's chief attendant. 2. Quality standards. The empress's shoes, for example, required a specific gloss level, akin to a medieval version of a beauty contest. The official polishing gloss standard, established in 600 AD, mandated that shoes must reflect candlelight at a distance of 3 cubits, approximately 4.5 feet. 3. Inspection procedures. On Mondays and Thursdays, officials known as the Polish inspectors would perform random inspections. If a shoe failed to meet the standards, the responsible servant could face a week of labor in the royal stables, an excuse that was far less glamorous than it sounds. 4. Punishments for non-compliance. The penalty for repeat offenders included public shaming and, in extreme cases, the confiscation of shoes deemed to be beyond redemption. This created a black market for rogue polishers who offered underground services at half the price but with questionable results. Roles and job descriptions. The Byzantine court shoe polishing operation was an intricate web of roles, each with its own set of responsibilities. 1. Chief Shoe Polisher, CSP. This was the top dog in the shoe care hierarchy, often a trusted servant who had the ear of the emperor. The CSP was responsible for overseeing the entire polishing operation and reporting directly to the court's chamberlain. 2. Junior polishers, typically young apprentices. These individuals were tasked with the grunt work, buffing, polishing, and ensuring that the right materials were on hand. They often worked for a meager stipend but were rewarded with the chance to impress the court. 3. Material sourcing agents. Before the court could enjoy a good shine, these agents scoured the empire for the best leather and polishing materials. They had to maintain relationships with tanners and merchants while navigating the complex trade routes of the empire. 4. Inspection officials, tasked with ensuring compliance with the polish standards, these officials wielded significant power and could make or break a polisher's career. 5. Court laundress. While not directly involved in the polishing process, the laundress played a crucial role in maintaining the overall appearance of court attire, including shoes. Technical specs and inventories. The Byzantine Empire was known for its meticulous record-keeping, and shoe polishing was no exception. Each court shoe was subject to rigorous specifications that were documented in detail. 1. Shoe types. Calceus, a formal shoe with a thicker sole, often worn by men. Solii, a lighter sandal-style shoe worn by women, often requiring less frequent polishing. Cothurnus, a high-heeled boot, typically reserved for dramatic occasions. 2. Polishing materials. Beeswax, a primary ingredient used in the polishing mixture, providing a rich shine. Olive oil, often mixed with other substances for conditioning the leather. Charcoal dust, used to create a high gloss, however, excessive use could lead to a darkening of the shoe, an unfortunate faux pas. 3. Inventory lists. Each court had a detailed inventory that included number of shoes per courtier, detailed records of polishing materials, daily logs of inspections and outcomes. 4. Polishing frequencies. Daily, for shoes worn by high-ranking officials. Weekly, for less frequently used footwear. Monthly, for ceremonial shoes. A brief interlude of witty asides. One might wonder if the Byzantine Empire ever considered outsourcing their shoe polishing to a neighboring kingdom. After all, who wouldn't want to delegate the mind-numbing task of buffing leather to a group of less fortunate shoemakers? Yet, as history would have it, this was one task that remained strictly within the court, because, as they say, you can take the shoes out of the court, but you can't take the court out of the shoes. Conclusion. In this whirlwind tour of the Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, we've uncovered a world that, while seemingly dull, reveals the complex interplay of economics, bureaucracy, and societal norms in the Byzantine Empire. From the construction methods and materials to the meticulous bureaucratic rules and the roles of various players, it's clear that even the most mundane aspects of life in Byzantium were steeped in tradition and formality. So, the next time you find yourself grumbling about polishing your own shoes, remember the Byzantine courtiers, who endured rigorous inspections and the ever-watchful eyes of the Polish inspectors, all in the name of style and status. In the grand scheme of history, perhaps it's best to keep a little shine, both on our shoes and in our lives. After all, who wouldn't want to reflect a bit of Byzantine grandeur in their everyday existence? The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. The Byzantine Empire, often romanticized for its opulence and intrigue, had aspects that were decidedly less thrilling. Among these was the meticulous and often bureaucratic process of shoe polishing, which, while seemingly mundane, played a pivotal role in the daily lives of courtiers. This historical examination offers a closer look at the construction methods, materials, costs, bureaucratic rules, roles, technical specifications, and inventories that defined the Byzantine court's shoe polishing schedules. So, lace up your shoes as we delve into this surprisingly detailed world. ## Construction methods and materials. From the early days of the Byzantine Empire, circa 330 AD, to its eventual decline in 1453, shoes were crafted with a fusion of practicality and artistry. The court's shoe polishing involved specific types of footwear, primarily derived from two methods of construction, the turn shoe and the welted shoe. ## Turn shoe method. 1. Design. The turn shoe was constructed by stitching the upper part of the shoe to the sole inside out before flipping it right side out. 2. Materials. Typically made from soft leather, cowhide or kid leather, turn shoes provided a snug fit. 3. Cost. Estimated at 1 to 3 solidi per pair, depending on the complexity of design and quality of leather. ## Welted shoe method. 1. Design. The welted shoe construction involved sewing an additional strip of leather, the welt, to the upper. 2. Materials. Heavy-duty leather for the sole and intricate designs often included embroidered silk or brocade for the upper. 3. Cost. These shoes ranged from 3 to 7 solidi, with elaborate designs fetching even higher prices. Witty aside, who knew that the road to imperial power was paved with well-polished shoes? In the Byzantine court, a great deal depended on a good shine and even better leather. ## Bureaucratic rules and punishments. While the craft of shoe polishing seems trivial, it was enshrined in a labyrinth of bureaucratic rules that governed court life. The imperial edict of 691 AD established a series of regulations that created an official framework for shoe care in the imperial court. ## Key rules. 1. Frequency of polishing. Shoes were to be polished at least twice a week, with special occasions requiring daily attention. 2. Materials for polishing. Only approved waxes and oils were allowed, specifically olive oil and beeswax, both of which had to be purchased from designated suppliers. 3. Designated polishing hours. Polishing sessions were strictly scheduled, with morning sessions from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and evening sessions from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. ## Punishments. Failure to adhere to these rules resulted in a range of consequences. 1. Fines. Courtiers could be fined up to 5 solidi for failure to polish shoes regularly. 2. Public humiliation. In severe cases, offenders might be required to wear unpolished shoes in court, a fate considered worse than exile. 3. Loss of favor. Chronic non-compliance could lead to loss of status and favor in the eyes of the emperor. ## Roles and job descriptions. The Byzantine court employed a range of individuals dedicated to the upkeep of shoes, reflecting the importance of footwear in maintaining an image of power and authority. ## The Royal Shoemaker, Calciarius. Responsibilities: create and repair shoes for the emperor and his immediate family, oversee the quality of leather used. Hierarchy: this position was prestigious, often requiring a guild membership and apprenticeship lasting at least 5 years. Hashtag the polisher, politer. Responsibilities. Responsible for the actual polishing of shoes, required to ensure shoes looked immaculate for court appearances. Hierarchy. Often a lower-ranking position, these individuals could advance to become a royal polisher, responsible for polishing the emperor's shoes specifically. Hashtag the supply manager, Praefectus Cinctus. Responsibilities. Oversee procurement of polishing materials, manage inventories, and ensure compliance with bureaucratic rules concerning supplies. Hierarchy. Held a critical position, often working closely with the emperor's advisors to secure the best materials. Witty aside, with a hierarchy more complex than the shoe itself, one could assume that in the Byzantine court, even shoe polishers had to send a request to the emperor for approval before they could shine a shoe. Hashtag technical specs and inventories. The Byzantine court's shoe polishing operation was not merely a whimsical affair, it followed stringent technical specifications and maintained detailed inventories. Hashtag technical specifications. 1. Polishing waxes. Required to have a minimum melting point of 60 degrees Celsius 140 degrees Fahrenheit and a maximum viscosity of 20 centipoises at room temperature. 2. Application tools. Brushes had to have natural bristles, boar or horsehair, and cloths used for buffing were mandated to be made from linen to avoid scratching. 3. Storage. Polishing materials had to be stored in sealed, clay jars to prevent spoilage from moisture. Hashtag inventories. Weekly inventory list, as of 1025 AD. 1. Olive oil, 5 liters. 2. Beeswax, 3 kilograms. 3. Polishing cloths, 50 pieces, linen. 4. Brushes, 20, boar hair. 5. Jars for storage, 15, unglazed clay. The meticulous nature of these inventories was not only a reflection of the bureaucratic mindset but also an indication of the empire's wealth and attention to detail. Hashtag the polishing schedule. In order to maintain the high standards expected at court, a weekly polishing schedule was strictly adhered to. This schedule was overseen by the royal polisher and included specific days designated for different types of shoes. Hashtag sample weekly schedule. Monday, turn shoes for daily wear, all shoes must be polished before 9 a.m. Tuesday, welted shoes for formal court appearances, special attention needed for embroidery. Wednesday, repair day, all shoes needing mending must be submitted by noon. Thursday, casual shoes for leisure activities, light polishing allowed. Friday, special event preparation, all shoes must be immaculate. Saturday, review and inventory day, all supplies must be accounted for. Sunday, rest day, no polishing, but shoes must be aired out. The rigorous adherence to this schedule ensured that the emperor and his court always made a polished impression, quite literally. Hashtag conclusion. The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules reveals an intricate web of construction methods, materials, bureaucratic rules, roles, technical specifications, and inventories that underpinned a seemingly mundane aspect of imperial life. While the grandeur of emperors and the intrigue of court politics may captivate the imagination, it is the humble shoe, and its shine, that served as a daily reminder of the empire's values. So, the next time you think of the Byzantine Empire, remember that behind the gilded facades and grand battles lay a world where shoes were polished to perfection, reflecting the empire's pride, power, and the need for order in even the most mundane of tasks. In the Byzantine court, a good shine was more than just a matter of aesthetics, it was a matter of imperial dignity. #The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. The Byzantine Empire, often romanticized for its opulent palaces and grand battles, had a surprisingly mundane yet essential aspect of court life, the shoe polishing schedule. While tales of emperors and empresses might capture the imagination, the meticulous organization behind shoe polishing reveals much about the Byzantine court's bureaucratic nature and social hierarchy. Construction methods and materials. Polishing shoes in the Byzantine court was not merely a matter of aesthetics, it was a reflection of status, cleanliness, and attention to detail. The shoes themselves were often crafted from luxurious materials like fine leather, embroidered silk, and sometimes adorned with jewels for the elite. The construction methods varied by rank. While commoners wore simpler leather shoes, the upper echelons favored intricately designed footwear. 1. Leather types. Calfskin, soft, durable, and the preferred choice for nobles. Goatskin, often used for everyday wear, it was less expensive but still functional. Suede, occasionally utilized for more casual or ceremonial occasions. 2. Embroidery and ornamentation. Gold thread was popular among the aristocracy, while silver and silk threads were reserved for the upper middle class. Jewels, such as pearls and garnets, adorned the shoes of high-ranking officials and members of the royal family. 3. Polishing materials. Beeswax, the primary ingredient in polish, it provided a protective layer and shine. Animal fats, used as a base for polishing compounds, adding flexibility to the leather. Natural dyes, to enhance the color of the shoes and make them appear more vibrant. 4. Cost considerations. Polishing supplies were relatively inexpensive, but the shoes they were meant for could cost a small fortune. A pair of finely crafted court shoes could set a noble back as much as 100 solidi, roughly equivalent to several months' wages for a common laborer. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. The Byzantine court was notorious for its bureaucracy, and the shoe polishing schedule was no exception. The meticulous attention to detail extended to rules governing the frequency and method of polishing, as well as the punishments for non-compliance. 1. Polishing frequency. Daily polishing, required for the imperial family and high-ranking officials. Weekly polishing, mandated for middle-ranking nobles. Monthly polishing, accepted for lower court members. 2. Bureaucratic oversight. A dedicated official, known as the calciarius, was responsible for overseeing the shoe polishing schedules. Under the calciarius, a team of politors, polishers, reported directly to ensure compliance with the established protocols. 3. Penalties for non-compliance. First offense, a warning, delivered in front of the court to instill a sense of shame. Second offense, a public reprimand and a required written apology. Third offense, forced to wear unpolished shoes in a public setting, an especially humiliating punishment in a culture where appearance was paramount. 4. Documenting compliance. A ledger was maintained by the calcearius, detailing the shoe polishing schedules and compliance records. Failure to keep up with the schedule warranted an investigation, often leading to a court hearing, a spectacle that could draw considerable attention. ##### roles and job descriptions. The shoe polishing operation at the Byzantine court employed a range of individuals, each with specific roles and responsibilities. Understanding these roles highlights the layered complexity of court life. 1. Calcearius, chief shoe polisher. Oversaw all shoe-related activities, from purchasing materials to scheduling polishers. Ensured that all shoes met the empire's aesthetic standards. Reported directly to the emperor, often wielding more influence than one might assume. After all, who could resist a well-polished shoe? 2. Politors, polishers. A team of skilled artisans tasked with the actual polishing of shoes. They were often selected based on their attention to detail and skill level. Some were even trained in the art of shoe repair, making them indispensable. 3. Material suppliers. Responsible for sourcing quality leather and polishing materials. Often operated under contracts with the court, ensuring a steady supply of beeswax and dyes. 4. Inspectors. Appointed to ensure the quality of polish and adherence to the schedule. Often feared for their ability to report non-compliance directly to the calcearius. 5. Apprentices. Young individuals learning the trade, often starting as errand runners fetching materials. Their training included everything from polishing techniques to understanding the nuances of leather care. ##### Technical specs and inventories. To maintain efficiency, the Byzantine court established a comprehensive inventory system for shoe polishing materials and equipment. This system detailed not only what was needed but how much of each item was available at any given time. 1. Polishing kits. Each politer was equipped with a standard kit, which included a variety of polishing cloths, often made from fine linen. Brushes for applying beeswax, different sizes for different shoe types. Dyes for touch-ups. 2. Inventory management. The calcearius maintained a ledger of supplies, including beeswax, 50 pounds per month were allocated. Animal fats, 20 pounds per month. Natural dyes, various colors, with a focus on red, black, and blue, were stocked regularly. 3. Quality control. Inspectors performed regular checks on the quality of polishing supplies. A quality assurance report was submitted every quarter, ensuring the empire's footwear remained in impeccable condition. 4. Shoe lifespan. Average lifespan of a court shoe, 2 to 3 years with regular polishing. Shoes that received less frequent polishing could deteriorate significantly faster, affecting not just appearance but comfort. ### A day in the life of a politer. Imagine a typical day for a politer in the Byzantine court. The morning begins with the clang of bells signaling the start of the workday. Each politer arrives at the designated polishing station, armed with their kits and a head full of dreams about becoming the next Calciarius. After a quick meeting to review the day's schedule, they dive into their work. 1. Morning duties. Begin by inspecting the shoes assigned for the day, an average of 20 pairs, depending on rank. Assess each pair for wear and tear, making notes for potential repairs. 2. Polishing process. Apply beeswax meticulously, using a gentle circular motion. Too much pressure could ruin the leather. Buff each shoe to a high shine, ensuring that every surface gleams. 3. Midday break. A moment to share tales of court gossip, perhaps discussing the latest scandal involving a failed shoe polish inspection. Did you hear about the eunuch of the unpolished shoes? He's still living that down. 4. Afternoon duties. Complete any necessary repairs on shoes that showed signs of distress. Prepare the inventory for the next day, ensuring that all materials are in stock. 5. Evening review. Submit the daily report to the Calciarius, detailing the number of shoes polished and any issues encountered. A chance to shine, pun intended. ### Conclusion. While the Byzantine court's shoe polishing schedule may seem trivial compared to the grand narratives of emperors and conquests, it offers a fascinating glimpse into the daily life and social structure of one of history's most influential empires. The meticulous organization, adherence to protocols, and the importance placed on appearances underscore the complexities of court life. As we ponder the unexciting yet vital history of Byzantine court shoe polishing, we appreciate the dedication of those who ensured that every noble stepped into their day with shoes polished to perfection. After all, in a world where first impressions were everything, who wouldn't want to leave a lasting mark, preferably one that glimmers? ### The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. The history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules may seem like a dusty footnote in the annals of history, but beneath the surface lies a fascinating web of construction methods, bureaucratic rules, and the elaborate roles of those tasked with keeping the court's footwear impeccable. Buckle up, dear reader, as we embark on a journey through the meticulous and often mundane world of shoe care in the Byzantine Empire. ### Construction methods and materials. The Byzantine court shoe, or calceus, was not merely a fashion statement, it was a symbol of status and power. From the 4th century onwards, these shoes were constructed using a variety of materials that reflected the wealth and importance of their wearers. 1. Materials. Leather, the primary material, sourced from the finest tanneries in Constantinople, particularly known for their use of oak bark in the tanning process. This method produced supple, durable leather that could withstand the rigors of court life. Silk, often used as an overlay or for decorative elements, silk was typically reserved for the highest echelons of the court. Gold and silver thread, embellishments that indicated wealth and status. These threads were used for intricate designs on the upper part of the shoe. 2. Construction techniques. Cobbler's art. The shoes were handmade by skilled cobblers who employed techniques passed down through generations, including hand stitching and the use of wooden lasts for shaping. Sole attachment. The soles were often made from multiple layers of leather glued together for durability, a technique that ensured longevity, a must in the bustling courts where every step was scrutinized. 3. Costs. A pair of basic leather shoes might cost around 10 solidi, the currency of the time, while a pair adorned with gold thread and silk could soar to 50 solidi or more, a price tag that would make even the wealthiest nobleman think twice before stepping into mud. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### The Byzantine Empire was known for its complex bureaucracy, and the shoe polishing schedule was no exception. The court's shoe care was overseen by a designated official, the cleansing curator, whose job it was to ensure that the polishing was performed according to strict guidelines set forth by the emperor himself. 1. Regulations. Frequency. Shoes were to be polished daily, with special attention given before public appearances. A court decree from 576 AD specified that any noble arriving at court with unpolished shoes would face a fine of 5 solidi. Polishing materials. Only approved waxes and oils could be used. A list of preferred materials was circulated every year, with the latest edition being released in 608 AD. 2. Punishments. Fines. Failure to comply with the polishing schedule resulted in hefty fines that could cripple a courtier's finances. Public shaming. Those found wearing unpolished shoes were paraded before the court in a display of shame, an embarrassing spectacle for anyone, especially for the vain. 3. Exceptions. There were some leniencies. For instance, during the Great Plague of 542 AD, shoe polishing was deemed a non-essential task, much to the relief of many beleaguered courtiers. ##### roles and job descriptions. The Byzantine shoe polishing operation was an intricate affair requiring a variety of roles to ensure the proper upkeep of footwear. Here's a breakdown of the key positions. 1. Cleansing curator, the overseer of shoe care, responsible for maintaining the standards set by the emperor. The curator's office was located near the throne room, and they were expected to report directly to the emperor about the state of the court's footwear. 2. Polishers. These craftsmen were the unsung heroes of the courtyard. Trained in the fine art of shoe polishing, they worked in teams, using specific techniques to achieve that mirror-like finish. Each polisher had their own secret recipe for polishing wax, which was closely guarded. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a family recipe for spaghetti sauce. 3. Footmen. These were the lucky individuals who had the honor, or burden, of carrying the shoes of the courtiers. They were also responsible for the shoes' upkeep during court events. A footman who failed to keep shoes in pristine condition would find themselves on the receiving end of a stern reprimand and possibly worse, being assigned to the emperor's least favorite chamber. 4. Inspectors. Every week, inspectors would perform random checks on shoes to ensure compliance with the polishing schedule. Their reports dictated the fate of many a courtier's finances and reputation. Hashtag 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 technical specs and inventories. The Byzantine shoe polishing operation was detail-oriented, with specific technical specifications that ensured every shoe met the standards of the court. Here's a look at the details that mattered. 1. Polishing standards. Gloss factor. Shoes were rated on a scale of 1 to 10, with a score of 8 or higher considered acceptable for public appearances. Durability. The polish used had to withstand at least 48 hours without losing its sheen. A test of endurance, if you will. 2. Inventories. Polishing kits. Each polisher was issued a kit that included 3 types of wax, beeswax, carnauba, and a secret blend. 2 applicators, 1 for wax and 1 for buffing. 1 polishing cloth, made from the finest Egyptian cotton. Shoe inventory. A meticulous record was kept of every pair of shoes within the court, including the owner's name, the date of the last polish, and any noted damages, a veritable shoe census. 3. Record keeping. By the late 8th century, the cleansing curator had adopted a ledger system that recorded the type of shoe, its condition, and the frequency of polishing. This ledger would eventually evolve into a more complex bureaucratic document known as the Shoe Register of Constantinople. Hashtag 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 witty asides. One can only imagine the heated debates among nobles about the merits of beeswax versus carnauba wax. My dear, have you tried the new blend? It leaves the most divine shine, like a peacock's tail. Or perhaps the footmen bonding over tales of court life, you think you've got it bad. My lord stepped in horse droppings just before the emperor's banquet. I spent an hour polishing his shoes, only for him to step in it again. Hashtag 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 conclusion. The Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules may seem trivial at first glance, but they reveal a fascinating tapestry of governance, social hierarchy, and the human obsession with appearance. The delicate construction methods, the strict bureaucratic rules, and the elaborate rolls all contributed to a system that, while mundane, showcased the importance of detail in a society that prided itself on its grandeur. As we look back on history, we may chuckle at the seriousness with which the Byzantines approached shoe polishing. Still, their commitment to maintaining a polished facade, both literally and figuratively, serves as a reminder that even the simplest tasks can define an era. So the next time you find yourself polishing your shoes, remember the Byzantine court and the elaborate legacy of shoe care that once graced the halls of power. Hashtag the unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. Ah, the Byzantine Empire. A realm of emperors, intrigue, and, let's not kid ourselves, one of the most meticulous shoe polishing schedules in history. Yes, you read that right. While most people think of Byzantine history in terms of wars, ornate mosaics, and religious schisms, we're here to focus on an often overlooked aspect, the art of shoe polishing within the Byzantine court. Buckle up, dear reader, for a journey through time that is as riveting as it is absurd. Hashtag 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 regional variations over time, a soul-searching expedition. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, shoe polishing wasn't just a personal hygiene matter, it was a regional spectacle. Imagine, if you will, the sweeping landscapes of Anatolia, where one might don a pair of finely crafted leather sandals, polished to a mirror sheen, of course. Meanwhile, in Constantinople, the heart of the empire, shoes were often more ostentatious than a peacock at a pride parade. The diversity in shoe polishing techniques was as vast as the empire itself. In the provinces, local artisans would utilize olive oil and beeswax, concocting potions that would make even the most hardened cynic swoon with delight. Meanwhile, in the court, a more extravagant approach was adopted. Here, shoe polish was often imported from exotic locales, think saffron from Persia and pigments from the farthest reaches of the Arabian Peninsula, all mixed into a gooey concoction that would shine brighter than an emperor's crown on a sunny day. Let's not forget the Byzantine penchant for bureaucracy, which mandated that each region adhere to its own shoe polishing schedules. In Thessalonica, shoes were polished every third day of the week, while in the more extravagant circles of Constantinople, it was a daily affair. This led to a delightful confusion among the footmen, who often had to consult dusty ledgers just to figure out when to fetch their master's shoes. Talk about a logistical nightmare. #### laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, a solemn duty. As we dive deeper into the Byzantine shoe polishing world, we find ourselves knee-deep in a veritable swamp of laws and edicts. The Byzantine emperors were nothing if not meticulous, and when it came to shoe care, they wanted to ensure that every cobbler and courtier was adhering to the highest standards. In 451 AD, Emperor Marcian issued the infamous Edict of Shiny Shoes, which mandated that all court officials maintain a strict polishing schedule. Failure to comply meant not only a public shaming but also the very real threat of being denied access to the court's famed banquets. Imagine the horror of being forced to eat your lentils alone because your shoes were less than gleaming. Taxes on shoe polish were also a thing, because why not add a little financial incentive to the mix? The Polish tax was levied on any substance deemed necessary to keep shoes looking less drab than a cloudy day in Byzantium. This tax was collected with the same fervor as the infamous land tax, leading many a cobbler to roll their eyes and mutter about the inefficiency of government. And, oh, the ledgers. Byzantine record-keeping was a finely tuned machine of quills and ink, and the shoe polishing records were no exception. Imagine a scribe, hunched over in a dimly lit chamber, recording every ounce of polish used and each shoe polished, along with the names of the wearers. It was a bureaucratic ballet of sorts, choreographed to maintain the empire's reputation for cleanliness and moral superiority. #### logistics and supply chains, a soul-searching journey. Now, let's talk logistics, because what is a shoe polishing schedule without the intricate dance of supply chains? The Byzantine Empire was a vast network of trade routes, and the demand for high-quality shoe polish was no small factor in its economic engine. Picture a caravan laden with the finest ingredients for shoe polish, winding its way through treacherous mountain passes and bustling marketplaces, all while dodging bandits who might have been more interested in stealing sandals than in a good pair of shoes. The supply chain for shoe polish was a well-oiled machine, albeit one filled with the occasional hiccup. When the saffron shipments from Persia were delayed due to, let's say, a minor skirmish over some sand dunes, the court would find itself in quite the pickle. Imagine the panic in the palace as courtiers scrambled to find an alternative polish, only to be met with the grim realization that nothing could quite match the brilliance of saffron-infused concoctions. The emperor, decked in imperial robes and not a speck of dirt on his shoes, would be faced with the horrifying prospect of appearing in public with less than polished footwear. The horror. ##### record keeping, the nitty-gritty details. As we delve deeper into the realm of record keeping, we find that shoe polishing schedules were meticulously documented, often in a manner that would make modern accountants weep with joy. Each courtier was assigned a specific shoe shiner, who was responsible for maintaining the footwear of the aristocracy. These records, filled with details about the type of polish used, the frequency of polishing, and even the weather conditions on each day, were preserved in the annals of Byzantine history as if they were sacred texts. One particularly famous ledger, known as the Chronicles of the Polished Sole, details the shoe polishing activities of Emperor Justinian I. It noted that on the 12th of September in 532 AD, his shoes were polished using a mixture of olive oil and crushed lapis lazuli to achieve an otherworldly hue. The entry goes on to describe how the emperor's shoes shone like the sun, causing a minor spectacle during a public appearance. However, one must wonder about the poor scribe who was tasked with documenting these mundane yet significant events. Was he excited about his role in the empire, or did he secretly long to document tales of valor and conquest? You can imagine the size of frustration as he wrote, day after day, about the brilliantly polished sandals of the Grand Vizier, instead of recounting tales of battles or diplomatic triumphs. ##### A surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, before we wrap up this riveting exploration of Byzantine shoe polishing schedules, let's sprinkle in a little grotesque humor, because what's history without a bit of absurdity? Legend has it that during a particularly dull court session, a bored courtier decided to spice things up by engaging in the bizarre practice of shoe polishing duel. The rules were simple: two courtiers would compete to see who could polish their shoes the fastest, using the most ludicrous substances. One brave soul opted for a paste made from crushed snails, which, let's be honest, sounds like a foot fetish gone horribly wrong, while the other used a mixture of wine and goat fat. The duel escalated quickly. Shoes were buffed furiously, and the air was thick with the scent of desperation and a hint of something far more nauseating. In the midst of the competition, one courtier, in a moment of sheer hubris, slipped and fell, sending a cascade of goat fat and wine flying into the air. It landed squarely on the emperor's newly polished sandals, turning a moment of frivolity into an infamous disaster. The emperor, known for his temper, was not amused. The court erupted into chaos as courtiers scrambled to clean up the mess, and the offending duo was promptly banished from the court, forever known as the Snail Duelists. And thus, dear reader, we conclude our journey through the unexciting yet oddly fascinating history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. It may not have been a tale of epic conquests or divine revelations, but as we've learned, even the most mundane aspects of history can be sprinkled with a bit of wit and irreverence. So the next time you slip on a pair of shoes, take a moment to appreciate the rich history behind that glossy finish, and perhaps spare a thought for the poor scribe who recorded it all. The Unexciting History of Byzantine Court Shoe Polishing Schedules. As we plunge headfirst into the murky waters of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, let us first acknowledge the elephant in the room. This topic is about as thrilling as watching paint dry on a particularly dull wall. But fret not. Beneath the layers of tedium lies a narrative that is both bizarre and enlightening. Strap on your metaphorical sandals, and let's wade through the muck of edicts, taxes, and the unyielding pursuit of immaculate footwear. ##### A soul-searching journey through time. To understand the Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, we must first travel back to an era when the Byzantine Empire was the glittering jewel of the Mediterranean, and not just because of its effulgent shoe polish. The Byzantine court was an extravagant affair, where fashion was as critical to status as was the ability to recite Homer in 5 languages. Shoes weren't merely foot coverings, they were a potent symbol of power, wealth, and, let's be honest, just how much of a show-off you were. In the early years of the empire, around the 4th to 6th centuries, shoe polishing was relatively standardized. The court's elite would polish their leather sandals and boots, often adorned with gold leaf, jewels, or the occasional peacock feather, on a weekly basis. You see, in the Byzantine world, a scuff on your shoe was akin to a stain on your reputation. Thus, the polishing schedule became a reflection of one's standing in the court. As the centuries rolled on, shoe polishing schedules morphed and adapted to various regional variations. For instance, in the eastern provinces, where the sun was relentless, shoes were polished every 3 days to combat the dust and sand that clung to one's feet like an unwanted suitor. Meanwhile, in the cooler, more temperate western provinces, footwear was polished less frequently, perhaps every 10 days, allowing for a bit of natural patina to develop, a trend that was eventually deemed rustic charm by some enterprising noblemen who had run out of polish. #### The edicts of emperors and the taxes on shine. Ah, nothing screams excitement quite like governmental edicts. The Byzantine emperors, in their infinite wisdom, decided that shoe polishing was not just a matter of personal grooming but a matter of state, a wallet's worth of state. Enter the infamous shoe polishing tax of 823 AD. This was not your run-of-the-mill tax, no, this was an imperial directive that mandated all members of the court to present a receipt for their shoe polishing expenses. Failure to do so would result in a fine or, worse yet, a public shaming involving the display of one's unpolished shoes. These taxes were recorded meticulously in ledgers, where scribes employed a variety of methods to ensure compliance. Some scribes used a color-coded system to mark the frequency of polishing, with green ink denoting regular upkeep and red ink flagging the lazy nobles. One can only imagine the panic that ensued when a lord discovered he was marked in crimson. The Byzantine court, in its bureaucratic splendor, even designated specific shoe polishers who were licensed to operate under the watchful eyes of the tax collectors. These artisans were required to keep ledgers that documented the types of polish used, beeswax, fish oil, or the occasional dash of crushed snail shells for that authentic sheen. Imagine a day in the life of a court-appointed shoe polisher, carefully noting down each ingredient while dodging the ire of nobles whose footwear was less than pristine. ##### The logistics of shine, supply chains and squeaky clean footwear. Let's take a moment to appreciate the logistical nightmare that was the Byzantine shoe polishing schedule. The empire was sprawling, stretching from the sunny shores of the Mediterranean to the frostbitten edges of the Balkans. Coordinating the supply of polish, brushes, and other tools of the trade was no small feat. In 10th century Constantinople, the bustling hub of trade, merchants hawked their wares, including the all-important shoe polish. A shipment of liquid gold, as it was grandiosely termed, would travel via sea routes and caravan trails, often facing delays due to bandits, storms, and the occasional, forgotten, shipment of olives. The Byzantine supply chain was a dance of chaos and precision, with shoe polishers relying on merchants who had to endure a veritable gauntlet of challenges to deliver their precious goods. In a delightful twist of fate, a shortage of quality beeswax in the early 11th century led to a mad scramble among the court's nobility. With shoe polish in short supply, many a noble resorted to alternative methods. Rumor has it that some attempted to use olive oil mixed with crushed lavender to achieve that just polished look. Unfortunately, this resulted in footwear that not only looked glossy but also smelled like a salad gone rogue. #### Record keeping, the Chronicles of Polish. Record keeping. The unsung hero of any bureaucratic endeavor. The Byzantine court took record keeping to a level that would make modern accountants weep with joy. Every shoe polishing session was documented in detail, from the date and type of polish used to the names of the nobles receiving the treatment. These records were kept in vast tomes, known as the Polish Codex, meticulously transcribed by scribes who had long since given up on the idea of a social life. The codex contained not only the polishing schedules but also the snarky comments of the scribes about the nobles' footwear choices. One particularly sassy scribe noted, Lord Alexios, despite his ostentatious gilded sandals, still manages to look like a peasant who's just stumbled out of a pigsty. But the records didn't stop there. The Polish Codex also included a section on recommended techniques for achieving the perfect shine. These ranged from the practical, a good buffing technique, to the downright bizarre, the use of prayer for divine polish assistance. Once, an ambitious noble sought to make a name for himself by claiming that a shoe polish made from the tears of a grieving widow produced the finest shine. Spoiler alert, it didn't. #### A grotesque anecdote to polish it all off. Now, before we conclude this riveting tour of the Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, let's delve into a rather unexpected, borderline grotesque anecdote from the annals of history. In the year 1071, after a particularly brutal battle, the court found itself in possession of a significant amount of captured enemy boots. Rather than simply discarding the footwear, a noble had the bright idea to repurpose them. He tasked his servants with cleaning and polishing these boots, despite the obvious association with the dead soldiers who had once worn them. The only problem? The odor of decay clung to the leather, creating an olfactory nightmare for the poor soul assigned to the task. Legend has it that the noble, eager to show off his thrifty ingenuity, hosted a grand ball where he proudly displayed his polished trophies. The attendees, however, were met with a scent so foul that many fled the hall, only to be met with the realization that the stench was emanating from the boots of the noble himself. The evening was dubbed the Night of the Stinking Shoes, and the noble was forever remembered as Lord Odoriferous. ####, and so it goes. As we step back from this whimsical journey through the Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, we find ourselves with an appreciation for the mundane. The next time you polish your shoes, take a moment to reflect on the Byzantine nobility who once faced taxes, edicts, and a veritable smorgasbord of logistical challenges, all in the name of immaculate footwear. So, while you may think shoe polishing is dull, remember, it's a legacy steeped in history, bureaucracy, and just a hint of grotesque absurdity. And if you ever find yourself with a shoe in need of a polish, just channel your inner Byzantine and make it a ceremonial affair, preferably without the captured enemy boots. ####, the unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. The Byzantine Empire, a realm of opulent palaces, intricate politics, and, dare I say, the finest shoe polishing schedules this side of the Bosporus. While many history buffs drool over the conquests of Justinian or the intricacies of the Nika riots, one must not overlook the unassuming yet crucial aspect of court life, the art of shoe polishing. Yes, dear reader, while the rulers were busy plotting their next power moves, a cadre of dedicated servants was meticulously polishing their court shoes, adhering to a schedule that would make even the most ardent spreadsheet enthusiast weep with joy. ####, regional variations over time. Byzantium was not just a monolithic entity, it was a melting pot of cultures, traditions, and yes, shoe polishing techniques. From the bustling streets of Constantinople to the windswept shores of the Aegean, the way shoes were polished varied dramatically. In the capital, the favored method included a blend of beeswax and olive oil, a concoction deemed both luxurious and effective in repelling the dust of political intrigue. Meanwhile, in the provinces, where resources were sometimes scarce, it was not uncommon to see people resorting to a mix of animal fats and, believe it or not, crushed seashells. One might think that this disparity would lead to friction among the courtly elite, but in true Byzantine fashion, it merely led to a series of regional competitions that would have made today's reality TV shows seem tame. The annual Polish Off became a highlight of the social calendar, where different regions showcased their techniques, with judges who, it must be said, had a rather peculiar penchant for footwear. ####, laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers. Naturally, no discussion of Byzantine shoe polishing would be complete without a mention of the endless stream of laws and edicts that govern such an essential aspect of courtly life. Emperor Leo VI, notorious for his love of order, once issued the Shoe Polishing Edict of 897, mandating that all shoes must be polished at least twice a week. ### Failure to comply would result in a fine so hefty that one might as well have been caught plotting against the throne. Imagine the ledgers kept by the court's chief shoe polisher, meticulously documenting the type of polish used, the time spent per shoe, and even the mood of the emperor during each session. These records were not just for fun, they served as the basis for tax collection and were directly tied to the empire's economic stability. Because, as it turns out, a well-polished shoe was not only a matter of aesthetics, it was an asset, a status symbol, and a vital cog in the Byzantine economy. ### logistics and supply chains. Of course, it wasn't just enough for the shoe polishers to have their schedules and edicts, they also needed a reliable supply chain. The logistics of procuring the finest materials for shoe polishing were nothing short of astounding. The empire's trade route stretched from the Silk Road to the Mediterranean, ensuring that the shoe polishers had access to the best wax, oils, and even the rarest pigments to dye their polishing cloths. Transporting these materials was a logistical nightmare. Imagine a caravan of camels laden with beeswax traveling through the treacherous mountains of Anatolia, only to arrive at the gates of Constantinople, only to find that the shoe polishing schedule had been altered due to a last-minute imperial decree. The chaos. The anarchy. The scandal. And let's not even get started on the time a shipment of exotic oils was mistakenly diverted to a rival court, resulting in a full-blown diplomatic incident. ### record keeping with lots of specifics. Now, as we dive deeper into the abyss of Byzantine shoe polishing schedules, let's take a moment to appreciate the record-keeping that went into this seemingly mundane task. Each court had a designated shoe polisher, and each shoe polisher was required to keep a detailed log of their activities. These logs, written in an elaborate script that would make modern bureaucrats weep with envy, contained specifics down to the minute. For example, on a typical Tuesday, one might find an entry that reads 1:08:00 a.m. Fetch beeswax from the stables. One must always have a horse nearby, in case one needs to make a quick getaway from an overzealous emperor. 2:08:15 a.m. Begin polishing the emperor's favorite red velvet slippers. 3:08:30 a.m. Realize that the emperor prefers a high-gloss finish, not satin, and promptly start over. 4:09:00 a.m. Discover that the empress's favorite pair has been misplaced by the head shoe polisher, resulting in a minor panic that nearly escalated into a palace coup. Such entries were not merely records of events, they were the lifeblood of the court, a way to ensure that no servant ever dared to let a shoe languish in a state of disrepair. ###One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, for a truly surprising anecdote that may leave you feeling slightly queasy. Legend has it that during one of the aforementioned Polish-off competitions, a particularly ambitious regional shoe polisher decided to up the ante. In a move that would be deemed grotesque by even the most forgiving of historians, he decided to incorporate a secret ingredient into his polishing wax, the rendered fat of a particularly unfortunate royal pet, a prized pug named Theodora. Theodora had reportedly been a beloved companion of the emperor and had lived a life of luxury, complete with a gold-plated food bowl and a dedicated servant responsible for her every whim. However, when the pug passed away unexpectedly, the ambitious shoe polisher saw an opportunity. He secretly mixed Theodora's rendered fat into his shoe polish, declaring it would provide the ultimate shine. The judges were impressed, to say the least, until they discovered the secret ingredient. The ensuing scandal rocked the court to its core, leading to a dramatic trial that culminated in the shoe polisher being exiled to a remote island, where he was forced to polish shoes for the local fishermen. In the end, the incident served as a grim reminder that while the art of shoe polishing may seem trivial, it was woven into the very fabric of Byzantine life. The shoe polisher's fate became a cautionary tale, ensuring that future generations of polishers would think twice before experimenting with any, unconventional ingredients. Conclusion. In the grand tapestry of history, tales of conquest, betrayal, and political intrigue often overshadow the more mundane aspects of life. However, the Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules stand as a testament to the complexities of life in an empire that thrived on order, beauty, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. As we reflect on the importance of shoe polishing in Byzantine culture, let us not forget that behind every grand empire lies a cadre of dedicated servants, armed with beeswax and a schedule, polishing away as history unfolds around them. And who knows? Perhaps the next time you gaze upon a shiny pair of shoes, you'll remember the Byzantine Empire's intricate web of laws, logistics, and an unfortunate pug named Theodora. The Unexciting History of Byzantine Court Shoe Polishing Schedules, a treatise on tedium. Gather round, dear readers, as we embark on an enthralling journey through the annals of history, where the truly riveting tales of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules await us. Hold on to your socks, this will be a riveting romp through regional variations, legalese, logistics, and a sprinkle of the grotesque. Grab your finest pair of sandals, or, let's be honest, whatever you've got lying around, and let's dive into the murky depths of this barely touched subject. ### The shoe that ruled an empire, a brief introduction. Before we delve into the nitty-gritty of shoe polishing schedules, let's set the stage. The Byzantine Empire, a sprawling entity that thrived from 330 AD until the fall of Constantinople in 1453, was more than just a backdrop for power struggles and theological debates. It was a veritable fashion runway for the elite, where the shoes were as ornate as the crowns they accompanied. And what good is a shiny crown if it's perched atop a pair of scuffed shoes? Enter the court shoe polishers, the unsung heroes who kept the footwear of emperors and empresses looking spiffy enough to distract from the infighting and backstabbing happening in the throne room. ### Regional variations over time. In the early days of the Byzantine Empire, the shoe polishing schedule was as chaotic as a family reunion at a fast food joint. Each region had its own peculiarities. In the bustling streets of Constantinople, where the hustle and bustle made the stock market seem like a quiet library, court shoe polishers worked overtime. Meanwhile, in the more laid-back provinces like Thrace, the shoe polishers took their sweet time, perhaps polishing their own shoes more than those of the aristocracy. By the 10th century, the fashion police had arrived, dictating that shoes should be polished a minimum of twice a week, once for the court and once for public appearances. The edict was issued with the same fervor as a modern-day influencer declaring the hottest new trend. A stern law, however, stated that failure to adhere to this schedule could result in a fine equivalent to a year's salary for a commoner. That's right, nothing says, "I care," like a hefty tax on your lack of shoe shine. ##### laws, edicts, and taxes, the bureaucratic ballet. It's no surprise that the Byzantine Empire was rife with laws and edicts, but did you know there was an entire codex dedicated to shoe care? Enter the Codex Politorius, a remarkable manuscript filled with regulations governing the art of shoe polishing. This document was a veritable Rosetta Stone for anyone trying to navigate the Byzantine shoe care bureaucracy. In the city of Nicaea, a particularly zealous emperor instituted the polishing tax. Under this mandate, every household was required to pay a small fee to have their shoes polished bi-weekly. The tax collectors, armed with their ledgers and a keen eye for dirty shoes, would roam the streets, ensuring compliance. Those found with unpolished shoes faced the ultimate embarrassment, a public shaming in front of the local shoe polishers. Imagine having to stand there while onlookers pointed and gasped, "Oh dear, look at those shoes. How dare they walk among us?" ###logistics and supply chains, organized chaos. Now, you might be wondering about the logistics of this elaborate shoe polishing operation. How did the Byzantine Empire manage to keep all those shoes shiny and pristine? With an impressive supply chain, of course. Polishing wax was a closely guarded secret, made from a blend of beeswax, olive oil, and a hint of something we can only assume was a family recipe passed down through generations. Supply chains ran like well-oiled machines, with couriers delivering supplies to polishers throughout the empire. However, these operations were not without their hiccups. A particularly harsh winter in 1041 resulted in a wax shortage, sending the court into a tizzy. With the emperor's favorite shoes resembling something pulled from a mud pit, emergency rations of shoe polish were sent to the palace, crafted from whatever could be scavenged, including, legend has it, a secret blend of goat fat and crushed herbs. ###record keeping, the fine print. Record keeping, the lifeblood of any bureaucratic system. Shoe polishers were required to maintain meticulous records of each pair of shoes they polished. Every transaction was carefully logged in dusty ledgers, with columns for date, name of the shoe owner, and the type of polish used. Polished on the 4th day of the month for Lord Athanasius, beeswax blend, extra shine. These ledgers became a treasure trove of information for historians, but let's be real, who wouldn't want to read, "Lord Athanasius's shoes received a deluxe polish" over and over again? The Byzantine shoe polishing archives rivaled the most tedious of tax documents. ###the surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. So far, we've been sailing smoothly through the unexciting waters of shoe polishing. But hold on to your sandals, because here comes our moment of grotesque revelation. In the year 1170, during a particularly lavish banquet hosted by Emperor Manuel I, an unfortunate incident occurred that would go down in history as the Shoe Polish Scandal. As the emperor dined on roast peacock and honeyed figs, a courtier, known for his particularly bad breath and even worse shoe hygiene, accidentally knocked over a bowl of shoe polish, sending it cascading across the banquet table. The guests gasped in horror as the rich concoction oozed over platters of food, transforming the majestic dining experience into a bizarre shoe care buffet. But the tale doesn't end there. A clever servant, likely looking for a way to save his own neck, suggested that everyone dip their fingers into the polish before eating. "It's the new trend," he declared, "a shoe polish that enhances the flavor of the food. It's all the rage in Thrace." And so, the court found themselves feasting on a delightful mix of roast meat and shoe polish, claiming it was an exotic delicacy. This moment not only sparked outrage among the more refined members of the court but also led to an unexpected boom in shoe polish sales, as nobles began to crave the taste. ###The legacy of shoe polishing in the Byzantine Empire. As we wrap up our foray into the unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, it's important to reflect on the legacy of this humble yet crucial practice. The Byzantine Empire may have been known for its grand battles and theological debates, but behind the scenes, it was the unsung shoe polishers, armed with their wax and rags, who ensured that the empire's footwear remained as pristine as its architecture. Today, as we scroll through Instagram, marveling at the latest trends in shoe care, let us remember the rich history of shoe polishing in the Byzantine court. While we may not have a codex politorius to guide us, we can certainly raise a glass, ideally one that's not covered in shoe polish, to those who kept the emperors looking sharp and shiny. So, next time you find yourself staring at a pair of scuffed shoes, take a moment to appreciate the Byzantine legacy of shoe polishing. And if anyone ever tries to serve you food with a side of shoe polish, remember, some traditions just aren't worth carrying forward. The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, a deep dive into the mundane. The Byzantine Empire. A realm of lavish feasts, intricate politics, and, wait for it, shoe polishing schedules. You might think that the daily grind of polishing court shoes would be the least interesting aspect of Byzantine life, right? Well, buckle up, dear reader, because we're about to embark on a journey through the thrilling, albeit slightly absurd, world of shoe care in a court that was anything but ordinary. ####Regional variations over time. First, let's set the stage. The Byzantine Empire, stretching from the 4th century until its rather undignified collapse in the 15th century, was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and, yes, shoe polishing techniques. You see, shoe polishing wasn't just an act of cleanliness, it was a reflection of one's status, a political statement, and occasionally, a tool of subterfuge. More on that in a moment. In Constantinople, where the air was thick with intrigue and the scent of sandalwood perfumed the court, the shoe polishing schedule was as intricate as a Byzantine mosaic. Shoes were polished daily, often at dawn, to prepare for the day's engagements. A meticulous schedule was drawn up by the chief shoe polisher, yes, that was a real title, who decided which shoes got the prime polishing treatment based on the wearer's rank, the day's events, and the whims of the emperor. As you can imagine, this led to some seriously competitive shoe politics. Meanwhile, in the provinces, things were a tad more relaxed. In places like Thessalonica or Antioch, shoe polishing was more of a weekly affair. Polishing was often done on Sundays, post-church, a sort of holy ritual that involved less scheming and more communal gossip about which nobles' shoes had been particularly scuffed that week. #laws, edicts, taxes, ledgers. You might be wondering, did the Byzantine emperors really care about shoe polishing enough to pass laws about it? Well, you'd be shocked at how many edicts were issued regarding shoe maintenance. The Emperor Justinian, famous for his code of laws, also had a thing for shoes, specifically, how to keep them looking regal. Edicts mandated that all court officials maintain their shoes to a certain standard of polish. If you showed up to court with scuffed shoes, you might as well have shown up in your pajamas. It was a fashion faux pas of epic proportions. Taxes were even levied on the import of shoe polish, which was considered a luxury item. The finest polishes were made from beeswax, olive oil, and the occasional splash of something exotic, like crushed gemstones, because why not? The tax revenue from shoe polish was so significant that it was recorded with the same fervor as taxes on grain or wine. The ledgers of the imperial treasury are filled with meticulous accounts of shoe polish sales, the number of boots and sandals polished, and the names of the chief shoe polishers who were deemed worthy of the emperor's favor. These records, while seemingly dry, tell a story of economic importance and cultural significance. #Logistics and supply chains. Now, let's address the logistics of shoe polishing supplies. One might think that in a world of opulence, getting your hands on some quality polish would be as easy as walking to the nearest market. However, the Byzantine Empire was nothing if not complex. The logistics of sourcing shoe polish were akin to managing a modern-day supply chain, complete with trade routes, taxes, and diplomatic negotiations. Polish was often imported from regions known for their high-quality ingredients. For instance, the famed Polish of Alexandria was a coveted item, said to be able to make shoes shine brighter than the sun itself. But bringing in such luxuries wasn't straightforward. It involved navigating a labyrinth of trade agreements, taxes, and sometimes even pirate-infested waters. Tales abound of merchants who attempted to smuggle in forbidden polishes. Punishments for failure often included the loss of their goods and, occasionally, their heads. The logistics didn't stop at sourcing the polish. Actual shoe polishing was an art form in itself. Specially designated areas within the palace were set up for polishing, complete with sunlight, plush seating for the nobles, and an array of polishing tools that would make even the most ardent shoe enthusiast weep with joy. Record keeping with lots of specifics. Record keeping, the unsung hero of Byzantine shoe polishing. The Byzantine court was nothing if not obsessed with documentation. The meticulous records kept by the chief shoe polisher included everything from daily polishing schedules to the specific type of polish used, the condition of each shoe before and after polishing, and even notes on the mood of the wearer. For instance, One entry from 1205 details a particularly irate noble whose shoes were polished with a substandard mix of beeswax and goat's milk. The chief shoe polisher, in an attempt to appease the noble, noted that he added a hint of crushed lavender to the next batch but failed to record what the noble thought of it. The missing feedback led to a court-wide crisis about the merits of lavender-infused polish, which dominated discussions at the next several banquets. Let's not forget the colorful language of these records. Descriptions of shoe conditions could be comically dramatic. The Duke of Thessalonica's left boot was akin to a battlefield post-siege, with scuffs resembling the scars of 1,000 noble battles. It's little wonder that these documents are now considered a treasure trove for historians trying to decipher the daily dramas of Byzantine life. One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, for the pièce de résistance. Amidst the grandiose tales of shoe polishing and court intrigue, there lies a story that is both surprising and, dare I say, grotesque. In 1185, during a particularly lavish banquet, the Emperor Alexios III decided to show off his newest pair of shoes, crafted from the skin of a rare animal, rumored to be a unicorn, but let's not get too carried away. As the crowd gasped in awe, a certain courtier, who was perhaps not known for his tact, leaned in and whispered, "But sire, they certainly do look like they could use a good polish." In a fit of rage, Alexios ordered the courtier to be promptly thrown into the palace dungeon. However, it didn't end there. In a bizarre twist of fate, the courtier was later released, but with a catch: he was tasked with polishing the emperor's shoes every day for the next year. The irony? The emperor's shoes became so polished that they were practically blinding, leading to a slight mishap where Alexios tripped during a grand procession and face-planted in front of the entire court. This incident, dubbed the Great Shoe Slip of 1186, led to a temporary ban on the use of highly reflective polish and sparked a court-wide debate over the merits of matte versus glossy finishes. Conclusion. So there you have it, dear reader. The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, filled with regional quirks, legal complications, logistical nightmares, detailed record-keeping, and even a hint of grotesque humor. Next time you think of the Byzantine Empire, spare a thought for the countless hours spent polishing shoes, because in the end, history is not just about wars and treaties. Sometimes, it's about keeping your shoes shiny enough to dazzle the court, quite literally. Who knew that beneath the layers of politics and grandeur lay a story so delightfully mundane? The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, amid the clashing of armies and the rise and fall of emperors, lies a rather unassuming yet fascinating aspect: the shoe polishing schedules of the Byzantine court. At first glance, the regularity of such a task might seem trivial, but upon closer inspection, it reveals a microcosm of Byzantine society. The minutiae of court life, the roles of minor figures, and the impact of petty rules illuminate the intricate workings of an empire that thrived for over a millennium. Minor figures and petty rules. The Byzantine court was not merely a space for emperors and high-ranking officials, it was a bustling hub filled with minor figures whose roles, while seemingly insignificant, were critical to the proper functioning of the empire. Among these figures were the calligraphos, the official responsible for maintaining the aesthetic standards of the court, including the condition of footwear. This role was often overlooked but was vital in a society that placed immense value on appearance and decorum. In 1025, during the reign of Basil II, a decree was issued that mandated the polishing of shoes not only for the emperor but for all members of the court, including those of lesser rank. This decree established a highly structured schedule, dictating that shoes must be polished at least 3 times a week. Failure to comply could result in a public reprimand or, at the very least, a scathing remark from the parakoimomenos, the chamberlain who oversaw the daily activities of the court. A notable case study involves the strategos of Chaldea, Michael Palaeologus, in 1261. Palaeologus was reprimanded for attending a royal audience with shoes that bore the marks of neglect, a faux pas that echoed throughout the halls of power. This incident led to the formalization of the Shoe Polishing Edict, which stipulated that all shoes presented in court must be polished to a mirror finish, a standard that became an obsession among the nobility. ###Case studies with dates and lists. The shoe polishing schedules were not merely bureaucratic whims, they were reflective of the hierarchical nature of Byzantine society. In the year 1071, a detailed log was maintained by the logothetes, the finance minister, that outlined the polishing schedule for various court officials, categorized by rank. The following is a summary derived from that log. 1. Emperor, polished every day by the head calligraphos. 2. Patriarch, polished twice a week, on Mondays and Thursdays. 3. Senators, polished once a week, generally on Wednesdays. 4. Generals, subjected to a rigorous inspection every Friday, with polishing required the day before. 5. Lower court officials, encouraged to polish shoes at least once a fortnight, with an emphasis on the eve of any public appearances. The logs also contained amusing annotations regarding the quality of polish used, including a list of approved materials, beeswax, olive oil, and a specific resin from the Mediterranean pine trees, which was said to produce the finest sheen. Comparisons to other regions. While the Byzantine court was preoccupied with the aesthetics of footwear, shoe maintenance was equally significant in other regions, albeit approached differently. In contrast to the Byzantine emphasis on the frequency of polishing, the English court of the medieval period placed greater importance on the materials used. For instance, in the reign of King Henry III, 1216 to 1272, shoes were often made from highly polished leather but were only required to be polished before royal events, thus prioritizing quality over quantity. In the Islamic courts of the Abbasid Caliphate, footwear was also a symbol of status, but the approach was less about a strict schedule and more about the artistry of the shoes themselves. The famed poet Al-Mutanabbi, who flourished in the 10th century, wrote extensively about the significance of finely crafted footwear, yet there was no formalized polishing schedule comparable to that of the Byzantine court. Archaeological tidbits. Recent archaeological findings have shed light on the shoe polishing practices of the Byzantine court. In 2015, excavations at the site of the Great Palace of Constantinople uncovered a trove of shoe-related artifacts, including a variety of polishing tools and containers for wax and oils. Among these artifacts was a particularly ornate shoehorn made of gold, inscribed with the name of Emperor Justinian II, dating back to 685 to 695 AD. This find suggests that even the process of donning shoes was treated with a level of ceremony and reverence, further emphasizing the importance of footwear in courtly life. Additionally, a collection of ancient scrolls discovered in the ruins of an old Byzantine bathhouse detailed the various recipes for shoe polish used by the wealthy elite. These recipes included exotic ingredients such as crushed pearls and saffron, which were believed to enhance not only the appearance of the shoes but also the social standing of the wearer. ##### Rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. What might we learn about the values and priorities of a civilization based on its shoe polishing rituals? How did such seemingly mundane practices reflect the power dynamics and social hierarchies that defined the Byzantine Empire? #### Conclusion. The Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, though unremarkable at first glance, illustrate the complexities of a society that thrived on appearances and strict adherence to social norms. The minor figures who enforced these schedules, the petty rules that governed them, and the archaeological evidence that supports their significance all contribute to a greater understanding of Byzantine culture. The next time one gazes at a polished shoe, let it serve as a reminder of the quiet legacies that linger in the creases of history, echoing the tales of emperors, poets, and the ever-obsessive calligraphos. In the grand narrative of the Byzantine Empire, even the most mundane tasks held profound implications, shaping the lives of those at the very heart of power. The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, amid the clashing of armies and the rise and fall of emperors, lies a rather unassuming yet fascinating aspect, the shoe polishing schedules of the Byzantine court. At first glance, the regularity of such a task might seem trivial, but upon closer inspection, it reveals a microcosm of Byzantine society. The minutiae of court life, the roles of minor figures, and the impact of petty rituals all intertwine to reflect the complexities of a civilization that spanned over 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire, which emerged from the eastern part of the Roman Empire, had its capital in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and existed from the 4th century AD until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. This period was marked by a rich cultural and political life, where even the most mundane tasks, such as shoe polishing, were imbued with significance. The court's shoe polishing schedule, often overlooked in favor of grand battles or theological debates, offers insights into the social hierarchy and values of the era. Shoe polishing in the Byzantine court was not merely a matter of cleanliness, it was an essential ritual that signified status and attention to detail. The emperors, such as Justinian I, reigned 527 to 565 AD, were known for their meticulous grooming and presentation. The act of polishing shoes was often assigned to specific servants, known as hypaspists, who were tasked with maintaining the footwear of high-ranking officials. These servants were not simply common laborers, they were part of an elaborate hierarchy, with their own ranks and responsibilities. In terms of scheduling, shoe polishing would typically occur daily, with more intensive care taken before significant events, such as public appearances or religious ceremonies. For instance, on the eve of the Feast of the Theophany, January 6, which celebrated the baptism of Christ, the shoes of the emperor and high-ranking clergy would receive special attention. Historical records indicate that the polishing process could involve multiple layers of wax and oil, often taking several hours, depending on the intricacy of the footwear designs. One notable example of the importance of shoe polishing can be traced back to the reign of Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, 1081 to 1118 AD. During his rule, he faced not only external threats from the Seljuk Turks but also internal challenges from the nobility. To project an image of stability and control, Alexios emphasized the need for proper attire and grooming among his court members. A well-polished pair of shoes became a symbol of loyalty and diligence, with the emperor even known to reprimand courtiers whose footwear was less than pristine. Such attention to detail and personal appearance was crucial, as the Byzantine court was a place where visual impression often dictated political power. The specifications for the shoe polishing process itself were quite elaborate. The shoes, often made of fine leather and adorned with intricate embroidery or jewels, required specific types of polish made from beeswax, olive oil, and sometimes even scented oils. The polishing was performed using soft cloths, and the process had to be undertaken with great care to avoid damaging the delicate materials. The level of shine achieved was not just for aesthetic appeal, it also served a practical purpose, as a well-polished shoe was less susceptible to water damage and wear. Moreover, this ritualistic aspect of shoe care extended to the more ceremonial footwear worn by the emperors. The sabaton, a type of ornate boot made from precious materials, would undergo a more rigorous cleaning regimen. The sabaton was often encrusted with jewels and required special attention to ensure that the embellishments remained intact and vibrant. This labor-intensive process could take several days, involving a team of specialized craftsmen dedicated solely to maintaining this aspect of imperial regalia. Historically, the significance of shoe polishing can also be viewed within the broader context of Byzantine culture, where appearances were paramount. The Byzantine Empire was characterized by its elaborate court rituals, and every aspect of life was steeped in symbolism. The court utilized a strict hierarchy that influenced everything from the seating arrangements during banquets to the placement of individuals during religious ceremonies. In this environment, the condition of one's shoes could reflect not only personal pride but also adherence to societal norms. The shoe polishing schedule also dovetailed with other courtly duties, such as the proskynesis, a ritualistic act of prostration that signified respect towards the emperor. A well-polished shoe was a reflection of the individual's dedication to the court and the emperor. If a courtier were to kneel before the emperor with scuffed shoes, it could be interpreted as a sign of disrespect or neglect, potentially jeopardizing their standing in the court. In conclusion, the shoe polishing schedules of the Byzantine court encapsulate a fascinating intersection of personal grooming, social hierarchy, and cultural norms. While it may seem a mundane aspect of daily life, it reveals the intricate social fabric of an empire that valued appearance and ritual as much as military might or theological debate. Understanding this seemingly trivial task allows us to appreciate the depth and complexity of Byzantine society, where even the smallest details contributed to the grand narrative of history. ###The Unexciting History of Byzantine Court Shoe Polishing Schedules. When one thinks of the Byzantine Empire, grandiose tales of emperors, military conquests, and theological disputes often come to mind. However, one of the lesser-known yet astonishingly intricate aspects of Byzantine court life was the meticulous schedule for shoe polishing of the imperial court. This seemingly trivial activity was not merely about aesthetics, it was a reflection of status, power, and the incredible attention to detail that characterized Byzantine culture. ###Minor figures and petty rules. In the Byzantine Empire, the role of a shoe polisher was not a menial task, but rather a job rife with political implications and societal undercurrents. The court employed a hierarchy of shoe polishers, each with their own titles and responsibilities. The chief shoe polisher, known as the Caligarius, was typically a former nobleman who had fallen from grace or an ambitious commoner who had climbed the social ladder through sheer skill and cunning. Beneath the Caligarius, there existed a cadre of minor figures, including the Subcaligarius and Apprentice Caligarii. Each of these roles came with its own set of petty rules. For example, it was strictly forbidden for an apprentice to speak to a member of the court while polishing shoes. A breach of this etiquette could lead to severe punishment, ranging from public humiliation to expulsion from the court altogether. Moreover, each day's shoe polishing schedule was not merely a list of tasks, it was a carefully choreographed performance. The Caligarius had to adhere to a strict timetable that dictated the colors and types of polish used, the duration of the polishing, and even the specific foot on which the shoe was to be polished first. For instance, if the emperor wore red shoes on a Tuesday, the Caligarius had to ensure that the polish used was a rare blend of beeswax and crushed rubies, reserved for the highest echelons of court life. ###Case studies with dates and lists. Consider the case of Emperor Justinian I, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD. His Caligarius was a man named Theodorus, who famously recorded the shoe polishing schedules in an ornate manuscript that has since become a primary source for historians studying the minutiae of Byzantine court life. According to this manuscript, on April 1, 550 AD, Theodorus implemented a new schedule that included a double polish day every fourth Friday of the month, where shoes were subjected to a double application of the finest polish available. This innovative policy did not go without scrutiny, it sparked heated debates among the courtiers. A faction of the court argued that the double polish was an unnecessary extravagance, while another group felt it was vital for maintaining the emperor's image. Ultimately, Justinian sided with the latter, and Theodorus's double Polish day became an enduring tradition. Another notable case occurred on March 15, 582 AD, when Emperor Maurice was confronted with a scandal involving his chief Caligarius, who was accused of using substandard materials in the polishing of the emperor's ceremonial slippers. This incident led to the formation of a new committee, the Shoe Quality Assurance Council, which established strict standards and a comprehensive list of acceptable materials for shoe polishing. This council lasted until the end of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, with periodic adjustments to its rules reflecting the ever-changing dynamics of court politics. ##### Comparisons to other regions. While the Byzantine Empire had its unique customs surrounding shoe polishing, other regions exhibited different approaches to footwear maintenance. In medieval Europe, for instance, shoe polishing was typically a task relegated to the serfs and lower classes. Unlike the Byzantine Caligari, these individuals had no formal training and often used rudimentary materials such as animal fats mixed with soot. In contrast, the Islamic Caliphate placed a high value on cleanliness and personal grooming, but their practices surrounding shoe care were less formalized. While nobles would occasionally hire servants to maintain their footwear, there was no stringent schedule or cultural ritual akin to the Byzantine court's practices. This raises an intriguing question: how did a seemingly mundane task such as shoe polishing become a symbol of imperial power and social hierarchy in Byzantium, unlike in other contemporary cultures? ####Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological discoveries provide fascinating insights into the Byzantine shoe polishing culture. Excavations in Constantinople have unearthed remnants of shoe polishing kits, complete with small jars of various colored polishes and brushes made from animal hair. One such find, attributed to the 11th century, included a luxurious case made from ivory inlaid with precious stones, which suggests that the act of shoe polishing was as much about display as it was about maintenance. Interestingly, inscriptions found on some polishing jars reveal that certain polishes were linked to specific dynasties or emperors. For example, a jar labeled xenon wax was discovered in a wealthy merchant's home, indicating that even private citizens sought to emulate the imperial standards of shoe care. This leads to another intriguing question: were the meticulous polishing schedules at court a way to reinforce the power of the emperor, or did they inspire a broader societal trend toward refinement and elegance? ###### The ritual of shoe polishing. The ritual of shoe polishing in the Byzantine court was not merely a mechanical process, it was a ceremonial act imbued with significance. The Caligarius would often recite prayers or incantations while polishing, believing that the act of cleaning the emperor's shoes would bestow blessings upon the realm. The use of specific colors and materials was also symbolic. For example, black polish represented humility and wisdom, while gold polish was reserved only for the emperor's ceremonial shoes, representing his divine right to rule. Furthermore, the shoes themselves were often ornately designed, incorporating jewels and intricate embroidery. The act of polishing these shoes became a performance art in itself, with the Caligarius showcasing his skill and artistry. On special occasions, the Caligarius would even invite members of the court to observe the polishing process, turning it into a social event. The emperor would often present the Caligarius with a token of appreciation, a gold coin or a silk garment, reinforcing the Caligarius's status within the court. ###### The decline of the polishing schedule. As the Byzantine Empire faced decline in the 13th century, so too did the elaborate tradition surrounding shoe polishing. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 led to the sacking of Constantinople, and the loss of wealth and status among the nobility contributed to a diminished emphasis on courtly rituals. By the time of the Palaeologan dynasty in the 14th century, the once grand tradition of shoe polishing schedules became less structured, as political instability took precedence. In the wake of this decline, a fascinating transformation occurred. The Caligarii began to adopt simpler techniques and materials, reflecting a broader societal shift towards pragmatism over ostentation. The Shoe Quality Assurance Council was disbanded, and the emphasis on color and polish type faded into obscurity. What had once been a robust ritual, a symbol of imperial power, became a mere footnote in the annals of history. ###conclusion. In retrospect, the Byzantine court's shoe polishing schedules may seem trivial compared to the empire's grand historical narratives. Yet, these practices reveal an intricate tapestry of social dynamics, power struggles, and cultural values that characterized Byzantine life. From the minor figures who navigated the complexities of courtly etiquette to the archaeological remnants that tell their stories, the history of shoe polishing in Byzantium is a fascinating lens through which to view a culture that thrived on detail and ritual. So, as we ponder the significance of something as mundane as shoe polishing in the Byzantine court, we are left with lingering questions. What other seemingly trivial practices have been lost to history, and what do they reveal about the societies that upheld them? Perhaps, in examining these details, we can glean insights into our own contemporary rituals and the societal values they reflect. The Unexciting History of Byzantine Court Shoe Polishing Schedules. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, where emperors commanded legions, theologians debated the nature of Christ, and diplomats maneuvered through a labyrinth of intrigue, one might think that the affairs of state would be the only matters of import. However, nestled within the intricate bureaucracy and cultural complexities of the Byzantine Empire were peculiar practices like the court shoe polishing schedule. While this may seem trivial at first glance, it reveals a wealth of minor figures, petty rules, and the elaborate social customs that permeated the lives of those at the imperial court. Minor figures and petty rules. The Byzantine court was a microcosm of society, populated not just by emperors and generals but also by a caste of lesser-known figures whose lives and roles were governed by an astonishingly detailed set of rules. Among these were the kleon, or shoe-bearers, whose primary responsibility was to maintain the footwear of the imperial family and high-ranking officials. These individuals were often of lowly origin, sometimes even former slaves, yet they wielded a surprising amount of influence through their proximity to power. The shoe polishing schedule was a carefully orchestrated affair, regulated by a set of minor rules that dictated not only the frequency of polishing but also the specific types of materials to be used. For instance, court shoes made from leather should be polished thrice weekly, while those adorned with precious gems required daily attention. A decree from Emperor Justinian I in 527 CE specified that no shoe should be polished with anything other than the finest beeswax mixed with olive oil, a mixture deemed sufficiently luxurious for imperial feet. The Byzantine court was replete with petty rivalries, and shoe polishing was no exception. The Magister Officiorum, the head of the imperial secretariat, often found himself embroiled in disputes over the correct shade of polish to be used for different occasions. In 561 CE, a scandal erupted when a minor courtier accused another of using an unacceptable shade of red for a ceremonial pair of sandals, leading to an investigation that revealed a plethora of similar infractions throughout the court. Case studies with dates and lists. The shoe polishing schedule can be best understood through a few illustrative case studies that highlight the absurdity and complexity of this seemingly mundane aspect of court life. 1. The Scandal of 560 CE. In this year, Emperor Justin II found himself facing an unexpected crisis when the chief Cleon was discovered to be using a mixture of horse oil instead of the prescribed beeswax. This incident prompted a formal inquiry led by the Praefectus Urbi that culminated in the public humiliation of the chief Cleon, who was made to walk barefoot through the streets of Constantinople as penance. The fallout from this event led to the creation of a detailed list of approved materials for shoe polishing, which included beeswax from the Bithynian region, olive oil sourced from Crete, a selection of dyes made from crushed madder root and indigo. 2. The regulation of 600 CE, under the reign of Emperor Maurice, a new era of bureaucratic regulation began. The shoe polishing schedule was formalized into the Codex Polituri, which specified that all court shoes must be polished in the presence of a designated officer, known as the politer, who would oversee the process to ensure compliance. The Codex specified morning polish for official functions, afternoon touch-ups for informal gatherings, weekly deep cleaning involving special herbal infusions. 3. The Great Shoe Polishing Debate of 850 CE. During the reign of Emperor Basil I, a peculiar debate emerged concerning the environmental impact of shoe polishing materials. A faction of court advisors argued that the use of certain dyes was damaging to the health of the imperial gardens, leading to a temporary ban on colored polishes. This caused uproar among the Cleon, who argued that the visual splendor of the court was at stake. The debate culminated in a formal court assembly, resulting in a compromise that established a biannual review of polishing materials, which included an exhaustive list of approved colors and materials. Comparisons to other regions. When comparing the Byzantine shoe polishing practices to those of other regions, it becomes apparent that the Byzantine Empire's obsession with footwear maintenance was unique, albeit not entirely without parallel. In medieval England, for example, the role of the cordwainer, a shoemaker, was crucial, but their focus was more on the creation of durable footwear than on the ritualistic polishing schedule. The maintenance of shoes in England was far less regimented, often left to the owners themselves, who would occasionally engage in polishing as a necessary chore rather than a ceremonial duty. In contrast, the Ming dynasty in China had its own elaborate customs surrounding footwear, including the practice of presenting shoes as gifts during significant occasions. However, the emphasis was less on polishing and more on the symbolism of the shoes themselves, which often bore intricate designs and were crafted from luxurious materials. The Chinese court's footwear customs were deeply intertwined with status and identity, yet they lacked the Byzantine bureaucracy that regulated such minor aspects of daily life. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological discoveries have shed light on the Byzantine shoe polishing practices in fascinating ways. Excavations in Constantinople have uncovered remnants of shoe polishing workshops, complete with tools and materials that provide a glimpse into the past. One notable find was a collection of pots containing remnants of beeswax and dyed oils, dating back to the 6th century CE. The presence of these materials in such quantities suggests that shoe polishing was not merely a casual endeavor but rather a significant industry in the Byzantine capital. Additionally, inscriptions found in the ruins of the Hagia Sophia mention a politers guild, which indicates that there were formal associations of shoe polishers who likely adhered to the Codex Polituri. These guilds may have held regular meetings to discuss the latest trends in shoe care, much like modern-day professional organizations. In Palermo, Sicily, archaeologists have unearthed a cache of shoe polishing equipment believed to have belonged to Byzantine aristocrats during their occupation of the island. Among these artifacts were ornate polishing brushes, crafted from the finest animal hairs, and containers for storing various polishing agents. This discovery underscores the significance of shoe maintenance in maintaining one's social standing across the Byzantine Empire and its territories. 2 rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. What does the meticulous attention to shoe polishing say about the values and priorities of Byzantine society? And how might the seemingly trivial act of shoe maintenance reflect larger themes of power, status, and identity in a world fraught with political intrigue and social complexity? In conclusion, while the history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules may seem unexciting at first, it opens a window into a world where even the most mundane aspects of life were imbued with meaning and significance. The minor figures and petty rules, the case studies and archaeological finds, all serve to illustrate how deeply intertwined personal grooming practices were with the larger social and political fabric of Byzantine life. From the Cleon to the emperors, the act of polishing shoes was not just about maintaining appearances. It was a reflection of the empire's values and a testament to the intricate dance of power that defined the Byzantine court. The unexciting history of Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules. When one thinks of the Byzantine Empire, images of grand palaces, intricate mosaics, and powerful emperors often spring to mind. However, nestled among these grand narratives lies an almost absurdly mundane aspect of court life, the meticulous schedules for shoe polishing. While this might seem trivial, the minor figures, petty rules, and intricate social dynamics surrounding this seemingly unremarkable activity reveal a fascinating layer of Byzantine culture. #### minor figures and petty rules. In a society where status was everything, even the state of one's footwear could reflect one's standing at court. The shoe polishers, or poliotai, were often overlooked in favor of more illustrious figures like generals and philosophers. These artisans, however, played a critical role in maintaining the image of the elite. The Byzantine court employed a hierarchy of polishers, with the chief polisher, known as the archipolios, at the top. This individual was responsible for overseeing the shoe care of not only the emperor but also the various nobles who graced the imperial court. The rules governing shoe polishing were far from arbitrary. For instance, it was decreed in 1045 that each noble was to have their shoes polished twice daily, once in the morning and again before evening banquets. The archipolios would employ a specific color of polish based on the time of year and the occasion, with summer shoes often receiving a lighter polish than those worn in winter. Moreover, a detailed schedule was maintained, indicating which nobles' shoes should be polished first based on their rank. The emperor's shoes, of course, took precedence, followed by the patriarch, then the senators, and down the line to the lesser nobility. ###case studies with dates and lists. An illustrative case study can be drawn from the records of the court in 1071, during the reign of Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. A particularly notable incident occurred when the archipolios, a man named Georgios, was reprimanded for using the wrong shade of polish on the emperor's shoes just before a critical audience with the foreign envoy from the Seljuk Turks. A detailed list of shoe polishing incidents from this period includes: 1. Date, June 15, 1071. Event: the archipolios used a dark mahogany polish instead of the sanctioned imperial gold, resulting in an emergency polishing session that delayed the audience by nearly an hour. Consequence: Georgios was demoted to the rank of junior polisher and ordered to attend a week-long seminar on the significance of royal colors. 2. Date, November 3, 1071. Event: a nobleman named Michael requested an emergency polish of his shoes before a banquet. Consequence: the archipolios had to reorganize the schedule, causing a minor uproar among other nobles who felt slighted. 3. Date, December 20, 1071. Event: a rival noble accused another of sabotaging his shoe polish by introducing an inferior wax. Consequence: the incident resulted in a formal inquiry by the court, underscoring the political intrigue even in matters of footwear. These examples highlight how even the most mundane aspects of court life were rife with drama and intrigue, serving as a microcosm of the broader Byzantine political landscape. ####Comparisons to other regions. The shoe polishing practices of the Byzantine Empire can be starkly contrasted with those of contemporary European courts. In medieval France, for instance, the concept of a shoe polisher was far less formalized. Footwear was often viewed as a utilitarian object rather than a symbol of status. Nobles would typically rely on their servants for basic maintenance, with little emphasis on ceremonial polish schedules. This difference can be attributed to the Byzantine emphasis on appearance and the symbolic nature of footwear as a reflection of one's rank. In the Far East, particularly in the courts of the Tang dynasty in China, similar attention was paid to footwear, but with a different cultural significance. Polishing shoes was often seen as a communal activity, with family members participating in the maintenance of each other's shoes as a gesture of care and respect. This contrasts sharply with the Byzantine approach, where shoe polishing was a highly individualistic and hierarchical affair. ###archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have unearthed remnants of polishing kits used in the Byzantine court, providing tangible evidence of the importance placed on shoe care. Excavations at the Great Palace of Constantinople revealed a number of small pottery jars containing residues of various polishing materials, including beeswax, vegetable oils, and pigments. These artifacts not only showcase the sophistication of Byzantine craftsmanship but also suggest that the polishers were highly skilled artisans who understood the chemistry of their materials. In addition, mosaics depicting court scenes frequently included detailed illustrations of footwear, emphasizing the significance of shoes in social and political contexts. One particularly striking mosaic from the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna features a Byzantine emperor with impeccably polished shoes, adorned with gold trim. This imagery reinforces the notion that shoe polishers were not merely practical workers but played a pivotal role in the visual representation of power. ##### Rhetorical questions. What might the fate of an empire hinge upon a mere shoe? Could the outcome of a diplomatic meeting be decided by the sheen of a courtier's footwear? Such questions illustrate the absurdity and significance of the seemingly trivial in the grand tapestry of history. ##### Conclusion. The Byzantine court shoe polishing schedules, while appearing unexciting at first glance, reveal a complex interplay of social dynamics, power hierarchies, and cultural values. This unassuming aspect of court life underscores the intricate fabric of Byzantine society, demonstrating that even the most mundane practices can carry immense weight in the grand narrative of history. As we reflect on this peculiar facet of the Byzantine Empire, it becomes clear that in the world of courtly life, where every detail counts, even the polish on a shoe can serve as a marker of status, power, and political intrigue. And that's a wrap. We've zipped through the wild world of topic faster than a toddler with a sugar rush. Who knew? Insert witty line related to the topic. Here's a surprising nugget for you. Did you know that? Insert surprising closing fact. Mind-blowing, right? If you enjoyed this whirlwind tour, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment with your thoughts. We love hearing from you. And if you're hungry for more, check out our related episodes where we dive even deeper into related topics or episodes. Oh, and for those cozy nights, turn on loop so this episode plays until you drift off into dreamland. Sweet dreams.